Welcome to this update on Force 3.0.5. This turns Force into the ultimate standalone studio production and live performance workstation. We've added a full-blown arranger mode, allowing you to capture, arrange, and complete your song productions. MIDI multi, so you can connect up to 32 devices, everything from MIDI keyboards through to MIDI interfaces and CV to MIDI modular racks. We've also added advanced macro controls, allowing you to control and automate endless combinations of effects and parameters using macro knobs, pads, XY effects, or the crossfader. So why don't you join me and let's take a closer look at Force 3.0.5. So in Force 3.0.5, we've added a full linear arranger mode. This allows you to create your own songs, arrange your songs, capture live performances with all the tools to create and produce a track from start to finish. Now to enter the arranger mode, press menu and you'll see a new icon called Arranger. So if we press this will take us into our mode. Now I've already created a song so you can see all of the different WAV files that represent different tracks on our timeline. So we can select our tracks and we can also do this on our touchscreen. Now underneath our screen we have our 8 macro controls. This allows us to interact with the screen. So we can zoom in vertically to look at our WAV files, and we can also do this horizontally. We can control our playhead and move our playhead back and forth. And now to play from our playhead, simply hold down Shift and press play. We can also create song locator points by holding down Shift, press set, and now that sets a location. We can then use our playhead and move to say the verse, set our position, then we could go to say our chorus and set this. Now if we press our locator, we can now name, color, and edit our locator points. So let's call this intro. And now we have instant song positions. If we press play, hold down Shift, and we can jump to these locations. Now you can also use the loop feature. This allows us to set a start and end point so we can work around a particular part of our arrangement. Now once we've set our loop point, we can simply press play. And now Force is going to loop around this section. To edit your loop point, just simply use the macros and change your start and end position. Now to edit your song arrangement, press the edit icon and this will bring you up a whole selection of tools to edit individual tracks or the whole song. Then you can set your bar length on your timeline, press do it, and now that's been erased from our song. So if we press play, the piano section's been removed. Now to edit single tracks, we can use our new track editor. This brings up a separate screen, allowing you to edit your audio and MIDI on that track. We can slice our audio, we can erase, we can reverse, we can select, chop. Everything we need to do on that track, we now have the tools available. If we use the UI and hold down on the track header, this will bring a number of tools for us to edit the track individually. We can clear, copy track, copy events, reset channel, bounce sample, and Elastic Pro to render our audio. You can now capture a full live performance and record this directly into Force's arranger mode. This is a very simple process and very powerful if you're a live performer. The first thing we do is hold down our record button and we put Force into record to arrangement. This means now Force is ready for you to record your performance, and all of our clips will update on our timeline in our arranger. As soon as we launch our tracks, you will see visual feedback directly on the track. And this will auto update as our timeline is moving forward. Let's launch more clips. Now that we've recorded our arrangement, all we simply do is press our Back to Arrangement button, and Force will now play back my live performance. Now, if we want to edit or record any additional parts to our arrangement, we can. We can simply select the track, we turn on our loop point, and we set our loop markers of where we want to punch in and out, and we simply hold down record and press record to arrangement, and now press play. And we can now trigger our clip and punch this in. And now we've recorded a section into our timeline of our performance to the arranger. Now we can also add automation to our arrangement and record this in real time. Now to do this is very straightforward. We simply select a track. Now we have some effects already assigned to this track. We arm our automation onto red, and now we're ready to record. Press play. And now we can start adding our effects over our live performance. Now once you've recorded your performance, we can now view the automation. We use our track editor, and now we can select the parameter that we recorded and use the toolbar to make any edits to our automation. Once you've made your edits, we can close down our track editor and play back our production. You can also export your arrangement as stems or as a final mix directly out of Force. This is great if you want to forward your music to a singer-songwriter or to a record label or even to a mix engineer. If you use the tab Export Arrange as Clips, this will keep your original song arrangement and stem this out into separate audio files. In 3.0.5, we've now added MIDI Multi. This turns Force into the ultimate MIDI sequencing studio, so you can connect and route all of your MIDI equipment in your studio directly to Force, fully standalone. This means that we can connect any USB class compliant MIDI device, such as a USB keyboard, MIDI interface, external rack modules, CV to gate MIDI directly to a USB hub. This will dramatically increase your I/O in Force. Now to set up MIDI Multi, press Menu, and then we'll go to our Preferences, and we want to go down to our MIDI Sync tab. Now I'm going to turn on my devices on my USB hub, and instantly they will be recognized by Force. Now we can also name our ports so we can customize them to our own studio setup. Now to activate our ports on and off, we have our track button, and then next to this we have master. Now for instance, if I want my keyboard to always play and trigger my other devices, so I'd set this up as my master. Then underneath this we have our external sync. This means that if we arm this, we can now take the MIDI clock from an external keyboard, such as an arpeggiator, and then we can clock this directly to Force. Now that we've configured MIDI Multi, let's go to our matrix and configure a MIDI channel. So we're going to double tap on our UI and open up the channel's MIDI information. Here we can also rename our track, we can configure our MIDI inputs and our MIDI outputs. So if we select our MIDI out, press our data wheel in, and now I can select the MIDI output port that I wish to control or trigger from Force. We can also send the MIDI information from this track directly to another track, which is great for layering external synths. We can also configure our MIDI input and output number, our MIDI monitoring type, and also activate program change. Now that we've configured our MIDI keyboard, we can now play this directly into Force. We could also go to Notes mode and use the pads on Force to trigger our synth. Now the benefits of using the Force pads is that we can go to our Notes configuration and we can now set scale types, chord progressions, chord types, and trigger these from the pads. We've also added key MIDI control parameters to the macros. This means when you trigger a sound, you now have access to pitch bend, modulation, and everything from expression to sustain. Simply just hold down the macro and then release. Having control of your MIDI external equipment directly from Force's macros adds a whole new level of production to your music. Now let's record our external synth directly into the Force sequencer. Let's arm our track for record, and now we'll take an empty clip and simply press the clip. Now let's record some chords. We can also use our macros to control key parameters to shape our sound, such as cutoff, resonance, attack, and release. You can now record multiple MIDI or audio tracks at the same time. Simply arm the tracks for record and then select your clips. You can now capture your recording in one single performance. In Force 3.0.5, we have updated our macro controls, making Force the ultimate control service for live automation, production and effects. You can assign multiple controls to the 8 macros, to the Touch UI pad, to the 64 pads, or even the crossfader. Create DJ washout effects, EQ kill switches, add reverb directly from the XY pad, trigger effects from the pads, or assign synth parameters such as filter cutoffs directly to the crossfader. We've also added an envelope follower to modulate any of Force's automation parameters. Now, to configure our macros in Force 3.0.5 is very straightforward. Let's go to Menu and you'll see a new icon that says Macros. So as soon as we go into this, our 8 macros will give us feedback and tell us on the screen how many control parameters we have assigned per macro. Here's a DJ washout effect set to monetary mode. As soon as I let go, the effect is switched off. Now if we navigate to our synth track, we have a number of controls set on our macro. I have a cutoff frequency and a pumper, and then on my crossfade, the resonance. As we move our crossfade from points A to B, it will open and close up the resonance envelope. Now we can add any number of controls to our macros. We simply press the plus sign, we select the effect type, and once we select the effect, it's automatically assigned to the macro. We can even select multiple synths and control these parameters from one macro. Here I've got my bass and my top synth controlling the cutoff. Now let's add this to a performance. We can also set up parameters by using MIDI Learn. Let's simply enable MIDI Learn, touch the macro, and now we can navigate to a control that we want to assign to this macro. Let's go to our effects and we'll go to our master effects and let's select our filter cutoff. Now we'll turn the dial to add a value and it's now connected directly to our macro. We can now use Force's crossfader to assign effects, parameter controls directly for live performance or to record automation. We can set up to 16 different types of presets with controls assigned to each one across A and B. On crossfade preset 1, I'm controlling my frequency from A to B. And then on crossfade preset 2, we've got our drum filter. Let's combine these together. Now you can assign unlimited effects and parameters to Force's crossfader. You can now assign multiple effects and control parameters using Force's XY pad. This means that we can apply different effects to each individual column or even each part of the quadrant of the XY pad. Here I can go through rows horizontally, vertically, or the different segments of the screen. If we come out of full screen, we can now see our assignments. As I move through my individual columns, you can see the effects that I've assigned to each segment. If we press the plus sign, we could just keep adding more effects to the XY pad. For live remixing or production, this gives you the ultimate control. We can now assign effects and parameters using Force's pads, which is perfect for live performance. So if we press our pad tab, we can now select a pad and assign our effects. Now to see the effects on the pads, hold down Shift and knobs, and now you'll see the pads that have effects assigned to them. Now to assign an effect, press an empty pad, come out of full screen, and then press the plus sign. Now choose your effect and it will be added to that pad. Now let's use these effects and combine them over our performance. We've added an envelope follower, which allows us to feed an audio signal, such as a kick drum, to trigger the envelope. This can then be shaped using our controls. We can then add a parameter, which our envelope will affect and trigger. As we shape our envelope, it's affecting our parameters assigned to our plugin. We can assign more parameters by hitting our plus sign, select the plugin type and the effect, and this will also be affected by our envelope. You can now create and save your own custom effects racks in Force that can be inserted onto any track and then controlled by Force's macros. Let's navigate to our inserts, press the effects tab, and then load one of the presets available. Once loaded, let's navigate over to our matrix, and then if we hold down our knobs mode and then select effects rack. This means that our macros will now auto update, showing our controls. Let's add this to our performance. In Force 3.0.5, you now have the ability to import Ableton Live projects directly into Force. This allows you to take your projects and perform live or continue producing fully standalone in Force. Simply save your projects in Ableton and then navigate to your Force browser to load the Ableton ALS file, and now Force will convert and load your Ableton project directly inside Force. So you now have access to the launch matrix track clips, audio clips, including loop points, names, warp, volume, pan and pitch information, MIDI tracks, drum racks, impulse instruments, sampler and simpler instruments. Ableton import mode also imports your full song arrangement from Ableton into Force's new arranger window. This allows you to see a linear timeline of your song from Ableton into Force. Having the ability to transfer projects from Ableton into Force opens up a whole new workflow for endless creative possibilities. You now have the ability to use Force's pads to edit and chop up your samples. So to do this is straightforward. First thing to do, let's find a sample to chop. Let's use this sample. Now let's navigate to our menu and then select Sample Edit. You'll now see a new pad icon, so let's press that, and now we can trigger the sample from our pads. We can use our macros to affect the start and end points, or we can use our touch UI. Now to chop our sample, let's go to chop mode, which is next to trim, and now we can chop in real time. Simply hit the pads, and then you'll see the chops being updated on the pad and on the screen. We can refine any of our chops by simply selecting the pad with the chop on and using our macros or our touch UI. Once you finish editing your sample, hold down Shift, press Convert, and now we'll press Do It, and this is now a program directly inserted onto a new track. Simply highlight the track, press Notes, and now our samples are on the screen. Now let's create a beat out of these chops. Let's arm our track for record and select an empty clip. In Force 3.0.5, we've added Advanced 16 level mode to our pads, enhancing the speed of editing samples. Simply press Notes and you'll now see 3 new quadrants around your drum kit. So now when we select a sample, we can affect the velocity on one quadrant, tuning on another, and a filter on our bottom quadrant. Now as soon as we select another sample, we have the same features. Velocity, tuning, and a filter. Now we can change our quadrants by holding down Shift and Notes, and we can now go to the upper left and we can change what this will be. We could change this to tuning or a filter or a decay or attack, whatever we want it to be. And we can do the same on our right quadrant top. We could change this to say a filter or a decay, and then the same on our bottom quadrant. So we can customize the 16 levels of how it suits your production. Now let's use these features and add this over a track. We'll start with our snare. We've gone from tuning to velocity. Let's select a melodic. And we'll go from a high octave to a low octave. Now let's play our bass line. Force 3.0.5 also includes many new workflow enhancements, from file browser enhancements, pad mixer improvements, retrospective record, to Elastic Pro offline rendering, and much more. Download 3.05 today and start producing your productions from start to finish.